All right, so we'll get started. Welcome to Nuts and Bolts of New Ventures. My name is Joe Hadzima, and I'll be your guide over these 6 sessions. At the beginning, let me note this is the first virtual version of the course, and you know, entrepreneurship is a personal, very intense personal and interpersonal activity. So this is totally to us. In a way, it's very much like launching a new venture. So wish us luck in our process of doing this. So I guess the first question is, you know, why this course? This is not about theory, but about doing. The presenters you're going to see over the next 6 sessions are not academics who are researching and writing about entrepreneurship. They've actually done it many times, and I think most of them are actually doing something right now. So you're going to get the good, the bad, and the ugly in a way you wouldn't get through a truly academic thing. And also, note that we use the term new ventures. The course is about planning and executing new ventures. Now, this applies to business, of course, but it also applies to social developmental ventures, nonprofits, and government projects. We had the US Mint take the course 1 year, but I'm not quite sure what became of that. Maybe Bitcoin, I'm not sure. And it's consistent with the fact that MIT's Sloan School of Management is called School of Management, not School of Business. It's about managing. Now, my goal during this course is to infect you with the entrepreneurial thinking virus. Although in the current situation, it's kind of hard to think about a good virus. But the point is, when caught, entrepreneurship is a lifetime incurable disease. And you'll hear that over and over again from our speakers. The good news is it's not fatal, it is highly contagious, and it's transforming. And I see my internet connection is unstable, but we'll keep going. Keep in mind that entrepreneurship is a contact sport. This is not a Monday morning quarterback. You have to get right in there and do it if you're going to try to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is do some polls to get a little better sense of who's here. So the questions that the TAs are going to put up are going to cover prior entrepreneur experience, prior entrepreneur courses, age, and gender, just to get an idea. So are you going to post that? Who's posting that? Is it Claire? 58%, we had no prior experience with entrepreneurship, so that's at the one extreme. We've got 8% that have founded more than one startup, and 13% have done a startup, so that's quite a range. And as we'll talk about a little bit here, oh, they're still coming in, I guess, right? We're up to 205 votes. Okay. Let's switch to the next one. Have you previously taken an entrepreneurship course? And the answers are 54, well, we had 191, so there's probably a few more coming in here. But majority have not taken a course before, so welcome. You're gonna jump into the deep end of the swimming pool with this one. Have taken one prior course, and some have taken more than one. So again, that helps us. Let's see, what was the next one? We're looking at gender. So about 2/3, 1/3 male, female. You know, when we, in the world of entrepreneurship, the traditional startup people have been male. It's becoming more females are able to get into it more. And there's a whole bunch of issues that are beyond the scope of the course. I'm actually happy to see that we have that many. And then age. Okay, so we've got a whole range here. We've got a third in the 30s, about a third in the 20s, in the late 20s, and then 15%, 10, and then 40, and then there are a couple of slightly older guys around. I saw a statistic the other day that the average age of startups founders was somewhere in their 40s, contrary to what you think of as sort of, tech right out of the dorm stuff, but that's across the whole broad spectrum of things. Okay, well, that's great. So that's very helpful. It'll help our speakers figure out what's going on. So one of the things about this course, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, is it was the first time we brought together on the MIT campus a large number of management side students with engineer science students. And this course became a focal point for actually forming teams. Originally, we didn't really do much to that, but we noticed that happened. So we do try to help people form teams, because research shows that successful ventures have to have teams. So we're going to provide some pitch opportunities every day. And today we've got a couple of volunteers who are going to give a 1-minute pitch, not more than a minute. And then Bob Jones, our speaker for the second part of tonight, is going to lead some commentary about that. So who do we have up for our first one? Would that be Anna Bujosa at Pixio?
Hey, happy to start.
Okay, I'm going to just mute myself.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So basically, we live in a world where you can rent a movie in seconds, get groceries delivered in an hour, and buy your grandma a present and have it delivered on the same day. But if you take pictures with your friends, say in a party or a weekend away, and you want to have those photos in your phone, which most people do, it takes on average a couple of days to get those photos. And teenagers really, really care about this. They care so much that 75% of them basically individually message each of their friends to get their photos. So we think that in a world where facial recognition is completely available, and each of our phones basically gives permission to other apps to access our galleries, this should be absolutely instant, and we want to fix this problem, and we want to give everyone the photos that they've just taken with their friends immediately in their phones.
Okay, thank you. Bob, some observations.
Well, I think Anna has identified an unmet need, and she seems to know the audience for the solution. Now, Anna, how will you make money?
So we've actually partnered with an MIT pricing class, and we did a willingness to pay study. And we know that teenagers would be willing to pay about $1 for each party that they attended to for the service to be available for all of their friends. So it would be $1 for everyone in the group to get their photos immediately.
And have you segmented the market so that you know who is going to be most interested in giving you their money?
Yeah, so it needs to be people that change friends quite frequently and are quite social. So we know that university students from like 18 to 25-year-olds would be our initial market. And the Spanish market seems to be the best one to start because there's nothing like it. And the tools that they're using, which is mostly WhatsApp, is not that effective.
And how will you communicate your offering to these people? How will you find them, and how will you share with them the opportunity that you have developed?
That's a great question. One of my founders is a TV famous actor in Spain, and so he has a large Instagram following, and we've been giving them updates and keeping them engaged, basically the youngsters in Spain, and so we're pretty much using social media for that.
Awesome. Well, as Joe pointed out, we're going to be discussing a lot of these questions tonight and through the remainder of the course. So thank you and good luck with this.
So we try Peter McHale and Guy AI?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So I'm told if I stop sharing, they'll get to see you rather than see me. There you go.
Yeah, so the idea behind Gaia AI is to utilize some of our most cutting edge technologies of robotics and AI to dramatically decrease the cost of planting a tree in afforestation or reforestation projects. So in the last year, the UN published a paper kind of pointing out how dramatic of an impact the amount of land that we have that we can grow forests in could actually curb climate change. Currently, these kinds of projects are about 40% of the total carbon tax credit market. So it's a really exciting market. It's a dramatically growing market. Right now, currently, the whole dynamic of forestation is that it's entirely based around this unscalable human labor. And so people actually go out to this land, dig a hole, and then plant these relatively already matured trees into this land. The whole idea is that you're trying to work around this unscalable labor, that every tree that they plant better grow into a full tree. By using drones and labor that infinitely scales and with hardware that amortizes out over the whole use and cost, you're able to dramatically flip this on its head. You can do a shotgun approach. Plant a ton of seeds and X fraction of them are going to grow to maturity, and that's totally fine. It dramatically cuts costs in all the supply chain. You no longer have to nurture these for years in greenhouses and then make sure that the transportation is perfect with temperature and all these moisture and all these parameters on the way to the land many miles away. And so the whole industry is flipped on its head by applying this specific technology, and then kind of like adding on to that a lot of details around identifying the makeup of the forest as far as species, identifying where tree canopy is a little weakened.
You're way past your 1 minute. I'm sorry to close you down. I salute you for your enthusiasm.
No worries. Thank you.
I have done a fair amount of work in healthcare, and I have been in a number of situations where the benefits are clear and apparent. And I think there's a real parallel here for you because the benefits are clear and apparent. In the healthcare world where I often work, however, finding out who's going to actually pay for this is convoluted and sometimes mysterious because everybody says it ought to come out of your budget, not my budget. So who cares about this enough to step forward and say, right, I'm going to write you a check?
So the grand vision is that we sell on the carbon tax credit market. And so whoever is the buyers of those credits, to start off, we don't want to tie ourselves to that complex market and the time constant of growing a tree to sell. And so we want to sell to landowners who participate in that market as a service.
Good answer. Joe, let's move on.
You can see my slides here. We're back? Okay, good. So you've heard a little bit about what's happening here, but what do you get out of this course? We're going to spend 6 evenings, and we hope at the end we'll get some enhanced skills to do a bunch of things. One is how to evaluate a venture from an impact and economic viewpoint. Figure out who's my customer, who wants what I have. Where and how do I get financial resources to launch and grow my business? How do I scale it and make it sustainable? How can I retain a top-notch team? We're going to talk about employees and advisors. How do I negotiate deals and resolve team conflicts? What are the legal pitfalls I need to know about? And for those of you who are on this call from overseas, this will be about the US. And how do I pitch my venture idea? By that, as Bob does a wonderful session on this, it's not just pitching it to investors. As an entrepreneur, you're always selling. An entrepreneur is somebody who creates something, basically trying to utilize resources he or she normally doesn't even have directly. So you got to pitch people around your ideas. And we'll cover each of these in some fashion during the 6 sessions. So we hope at the end, we could ask you these questions and you'll be able to tell us how that's going to work. Now, the course itself is worth explaining why this thing even exists. It's really a lesson in entrepreneurship. A few students and me approached me some 30 years ago and asked if I could do a course on how to start a company. There was one course in entrepreneurship at MIT at the time, and all of the students had taken it, but they wanted to know something that was practical. They wanted to know nuts and bolts of how to do it. I said I would think about it, and then I got swamped in some things, and this was all pre-internet, probably before a lot of you were born. So the students went and put the course in the IAP, the Independent Activities Catalog, the physical print catalog. I'm not sure how they did it. And they said, we dare you not to show up. And at first I was sort of annoyed at that, but then I said, gee, you know, with that kind of passion, I've got a customer, I had to do it. There were people that really wanted it enough that they would go and do it on themselves. So I picked 6 topics that I thought were important. I called people I knew and said, you know, I know you've done stuff in this area, and can you come in and tell the students something about it? And to make it easy, I said, just say, you know, the 5 things I wish I'd known about sales, you know, before I started. And I said you had to either have done this or know somebody who's actually done it. And I didn't even know 50% of the speakers that showed up. I did worry that people would come and nobody would be in the audience, so I called just about everyone I knew, and we ended up packing, you know, 100 people into a lecture hall. The result, it was a great success. And the lesson, I learned some lessons. One is I had customers for what I was doing. People wanted it. I was able to clearly define the tasks to the people. I didn't have time to do it myself. I got great people, and apparently I communicated the mission to them pretty clearly. And I got out of the way and let them do their job. And that's how it started. And we did it again, and later made it a credit-bearing class. And since then, over 6,500 students have taken the course. It was the first large-scale course at MIT to put together the management and engineering. A number of 100K winners came out of this. And most important, many companies and entrepreneurial careers were launched from the class. Some even quit their PhD program and launched their companies. So the key message, I think, is you can do it. And that's why we keep doing the course, because people come back and years later, 5, 10 years later, I get an email saying, you know, I remembered something so-and-so said in nuts and bolts, and it really helped me. And so we'll keep doing it until we don't get any calls back. So during all of this, what did we learn? We've been around through bursts and bubbles and all sorts of things. And I think we've learned a couple of things. So there are 2 themes that we're going to talk about in the course of coming back to. The 2 success factors for an entrepreneur is you've got to create value. If you don't create value, you don't have anything. But if you don't capture some of that value so you can do it again, then you're not really being able to build a sustainable business. And when we talk about create value, we're going to ask questions about, for whom do you create value? How do you create value? How much? How often? And in capturing some of the value, we traditionally mean customers for for-profit companies, but it could also be, this is all about the business model that we'll talk about on Thursday. It could be monetizing users, that's the advertising or referral model. And the complex thing for all of those you interested in healthcare, in the US anyway, is third-party payers. Is your customer the patient, the doctor, the insurance company? Bob's going to talk a little bit about that, I'm pretty sure. If you're a nonprofit or a social developmental, your customer may be governments or NGOs. So to do this, you're going to need people. You're going to need resources, dollars, and/or relationships, and skills, some of which you're going to learn in this course, and some of them you'll have to learn on the job. And then the thing that's always good to have, if you can get it, is luck. Optional, but a good thing. So tonight's plan, we're going to tell you a little bit about who you are based on what you put into the sign-up sheet. We're going to introduce our team. We'll talk about our case study, and we'll go through some basics. We'll have a break, and then Bob will come. So let's talk a little bit about who you are. Over 450 people signed up for this, an astounding number from actually all over the world. Organizations include, of course, MIT, but we had colleges in the US. We had Babson, Boston College, Boston University, Caltech, Columbia, Concordia, Harvard, practically every school at Harvard, the Graduate School of Education, the Kennedy School, the Law School, the Medical School, School of Public Health. We had a high school, the Wheeler School. We had some high school. We have London Business School. We had University of Calgary, University of California, San Diego, University of Chicago School, the Booth School of Business, Wellesley College, and a number of others. Organizations, we had the Draper Lab, Charles Stark Draper Lab, Facebook, somebody from the Department of Homeland Security, Mass General Hospital, Microsoft, Raytheon, Samsung, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the VA Medical Center, Walmart, and several private companies. The kind of people included mentors to the MIT Portugal program, a student spouse, and venture mentoring student, a couple of service mentors, actually parents of MIT students trying to figure out, I guess, what we do at MIT. And my favorite person who said why he was taking the course was he was bored, he or she was bored during the pandemic. So hopefully we'll make that interesting. Now, what are the areas you're interested in? I showed you a little bit of that on our special interest groups, but just to go a little deeper, we have neuroscience, AI, machine learning, mental health, clean tech, biomedical devices, cannabis manufacturing, K-12 education, corporate entrepreneurship and innovation. This is one that is close to my heart since I'm in the middle of dealing with this right now from the standpoint of a small startup. I've been 6 months, actually now a year, into collaboration with a major consumer products company. I wish I had known more about it before I started that, but hey, we learn as we go. Energy systems, blockchain, real estate construction, impact investing, virtual reality, Internet of Things, 3D printing, cybersecurity, wearable devices, electronic medical records, fintech, women's health, defense tech, dual use commercialization, secondary market for kids' clothing was an interesting one. Specific kind of skills that people are interested in. One person said, I tried 2 ideas and failed, and I want to figure out what mistakes I made so I don't do them again. Bringing innovation concepts to government, sales and marketing issues in the medical device area. Want to start a new business, have worked for 25 years as an employee. How to start ventures in emerging companies. How to convert an idea into a reality, how to test the viability of an idea, how to share the idea while ensuring it's not stolen, how to form the right team. These are all the good questions to ask, and we're going to cover most of them during the course. And the previous experience in entrepreneurship we saw in the poll. So it's a real diverse audience. And I guess if you're the first time toe in the water type here, just try to soak it up. Whoops, I'm back here. I'm a little bit ahead of myself. Well, there it is. I put up my formula since it's actually MIT. So anyone have an idea? Maybe I'll ask the TAs. What is H equals R divided by E? The object here is to maximize H. Claire, are you going to jump in, or?
I'll let Tierno take that one.
Well, since you, go ahead, Tierno. No. Okay.
I was going to say we have 275 participants.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody here knows that.
Okay. Well, somebody's going to write, they probably took the course before. H is happiness. Okay. So most Sloan people will say R is revenue and E is expenses. Right? If you're business, you want high revenue, low expenses. And that's a subcase of this. So I really think, for me, R is reality and E is expectations. And this is sort of a universal law, right? If you under promise and over deliver, people are happy, right? And so it happens to investors. It just happens everywhere. So you can't can't really change reality much, although maybe you can change expectations. So managing expectations becomes important. And for all you math majors there who jump in and say, that's simple, I just have to give people no expectations and they're infinitely happy. That's an edge case we will talk about. So H equals R divided by E. Okay, so who are we? The bios are on the website, but that's a little bit about me. There's some links on this deck, and all the texts will be posted on the Nuts and Bolts site probably by tomorrow morning, as the morning after. Jos Bonson, who I think is going to participate. He has some family issues he had to deal with. He was a driver of the 100K competition. Our most important people, the TAs that you see both on your video and here, and I provided some LinkedIn there, and we'll go through them. All very experienced people, and becoming more experienced on Zoom as we go through this. So thank you. They're the people who are more important than anyone else, because you're going to deal with them a lot. So now I'd like to introduce a case study. Now we have, when you do entrepreneurial things, you get somebody to come in and tell you how they did it. And it's usually somebody who said, you know, I was in my dorm room and I came up with this idea, and then, you know, I hacked it for a bit, and then I went public and now I'm retired. That's rarely the way it works. So getting someone to come in and tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly is tricky. And our case study actually comes out of the MIT 100K competition, something called Virtual Ink. Now we use this as a touchstone to talk about. We won't necessarily be talking about it every night, but we'll have you look at parts of it. And what it was an electronic whiteboard at a time when these were very bulky and expensive. And it's a labor-saving device. And I'm going to see if I can stop share here and show you a video of the product.
Yes.
Okay. Now here we go. Sorry about that.
We can't hear the audio.
When you share your screen, there should be a little checkbox to share the audio as well, and then we could hear it.
Okay, sorry. Did you not be able to see that? Tried it out earlier. So we'll give you the link to look at. It's like a 1-minute type of thing. So let me get rid of this. And we're back. You're seeing the virtual links thing again? Okay. So we'll provide the link on it. So the question is, why do we include it? Well, the concept is easy to understand, and the way in which the Yonel Cherry came up with the idea is an example of how people look at the world and say, here's something that I think I could fix. And it's an interesting story, both of the times and the company. This was back at the internet bubble. And Yonel Cherry provides an unusually candid insight. We save them for the last class. The full, we'll reference Virtual Ink from time to time. The full plan is in the course reader, and it's also at nutsandbolts.mit.edu/materials/php. So that's the case study. Now we're going to go into, I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of venture planning and sort of set the stage for the rest of the session. We'll talk about why make a plan, who should do it, and the plan is a financing document. This is a little bit the MIT fire hose approach. You know, they say that getting an MIT education is like drinking from a fire hose. It may seem overwhelming at first. Some of this will stick tonight, some of it will become clearer as our other speakers dig in, and some will become clearer over time. So the first question is planning basics. Now, this is Dwight Eisenhower. He led the D-Day invasion, which was the largest invasion in World War II. And he famously said, why make a plan? Well, he said plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And the important thing here is the most valuable resource you're going to bring to a venture is your time. And so figuring out the plan, even if you don't have to write it down in a fancy document, is going to save you a lot of time and effort. Sometimes you do have to make a plan. You may need to do it for financing, for strategic partnering, to explain it to people, and to attract key people. The real reason is, why should you make a plan? Well, because you need to understand your business. The plan is a result of a planning process. Thinking through, what does it mean? Who's going to buy it? What will they pay? How will we deliver it? All those things. And maybe don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. You need to figure out things like, who are going to be your customers? Will they buy or use your product? What will they pay? Or how will you capture value? How will you make and deliver it? What resources are you going to need in order to put it all together? Through all of that, it's again a very simple concept. Whether it's any kind of venture, it's create value and then capture some of the value so you can do it again. In the case of for-profits, that's customers and profitability. In the case of nonprofits and other things, it's sustainability of the venture. If you can't capture it so you can redo it, you don't have a venture. The concept is simple, but the answers are not. And I've asked our TAs if they would try out their theatrical ability by reading a scene from the movie, The Social Network. So let me know when you're ready, guys.
Tierno, I'm ready when you are.
I'm ready.
Okay. I am Eduardo, everyone, and Tierno's going to be Mark, for those who have seen The Social Network. All right. It's time to monetize the site.
What does that mean?
It means it's time for the website to generate revenue.
No, I know what the word means. I'm asking, how do you want to do it?
Advertising.
No.
We've got 4,000 members.
Well, Facebook is cool. If we start installing pop-up Mountain Dew, it's gonna.
Well, I wasn't thinking Mountain Dew, but at some point, and I'm talking as the business end of the company, the site.
We don't even know what it is yet. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it can be. We don't know what it will be. What we know is that it's cool, that it's a priceless asset that I'm not giving up.
When will it be finished?
It won't be finished. That's the point. The way fashion's never finished.
Thank you. Applause for our actors? Air applause? Okay. Votes for the Academy Award, we'll give a link for that. So the point is, the concept of creating value and capturing value is simple. The answers are not, as you saw the initial debate in The Social Network. I went ahead and, later we know Facebook became quite the company. It went public, and when you're public, you have to file reports. And I went through the annual report on 10K, and it was interesting. Their business overview was to make the world more open and connected. And they had a couple of topics. How do we create value for users? How do we create value for developers through the Facebook platform? And how do we create value for marketeers? So again, the point is, it's not a one and done type thing. Facebook, like fashion, is never done. It continues to try to figure out how to capture value as it develops what we'll call a business model. And again, we'll talk about that more on Thursday. Another way to think of planning basics is, what's your vision and how do you support it? And I like a pyramid approach to this. At the top, there's that mission vision statement. Underneath that is the elevator pitch. That's when theory used to be you get in the elevator in a high-rise building in a city where all the venture capitalists had offices, and you'd have 20 seconds or 30 seconds to make your pitch, and they would invite you in. Most of the the VCs are in shorter buildings, so you have to be quicker these days. Underneath that is the executive summary, which says, we'll talk about that in a moment. What is that? And then the PowerPoint presentation, the pitch deck, and then the full plan, whether it's a document or not. Underneath that are a bunch of supporting columns, and we'll be going into pieces of this throughout the course. To give you an idea of the time frame on this, the mission statement is a sentence or a paragraph, elevator pitch 30 seconds, executive summary 2, maybe 5 pages, PowerPoint, famous 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font, full plan if you write it out, 20, 30 pages. But think of this vision that you have to distill down to everything you're thinking about to a very simple statement and pitch. That'll be part of Bob's discussion about who's your customer, and later on, how do you pitch it? So let's move on then. Who should develop the plan? Well, the founders, the team, a hired consultant, it could be anyone, but the point is you need to own the plan. Years ago, Charlie Tillett, who's going to be giving the talk on financial projections, was in the nuts and bolts class outside, and he was just graduating from Sloan. And I said, I've got some entrepreneurs that are really good. They're in the networking area. They know their stuff, but they just don't seem to be able to write a plan down. And we hopped in his truck, drove out there, talked to them. There were like 6 engineers in a strip mall. Charlie joined them, helped them write the plan that they owned, but he wrote. And he became CFO and took the company public, and it's still a public company. So the point is, it doesn't matter who writes it, but you need to understand it at a level of what it is you're doing, what are the important metrics. Now, the plan itself is a selling document. As I said, entrepreneurs are always selling. You can't lose sight of the vision. The excitement has to come through, but the plan has to be project your image, and it has to be defensible. These are the elements of a full plan. I'll run through them quickly. For those of you in the audience who are technologists, note that there's not a section called technology itself. People usually don't buy technology itself. They use technology to achieve some other goal. And the important thing in a business plan or a venture is to figure out what it is that you're doing that adds value and who cares about it. Technology may be the base, but as we'll see to the next session, it may be that the business model is where the value is. In other words, you can have a very good technology, but a bad business model, and you will not have a sustainable business. A little more basic things. If you have a plan, you should put this kind of information. This was the virtual ink plan with a little legend here, talking about confidentiality. The lawyers got a hold of this. It turned into that. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of confidentiality and some of this language on the night we talk legal affairs. What should be in the plan? There's a table of contents if you write a full plan. What do investors read first? Well, I think typically they look at the executive summary to figure out what it is, but what do they read second? And I think it's usually the people, because people are what drives most of these things. Executive summary, as I said, is the first thing investors read. It's like a resume for your full plan. The goal is to get an interview, to give the pitch. Then the question is, what do investors really look for? And I boiled it down over the years to what I call the 3 whys. Why this? Why is this something important? Why now? Why is this the right time to do it? And why this team? Why do I think this team will win? And if you get through that, it's sort of the 4th why, which is, why won't this work? And in the sales parlance, when people start to ask subjective questions like that, it means you've got them somewhat hooked. An example of a very good pitch or executive summary was Amy Smith. Amy works at the Edgerton Center at MIT, and she became a MacArthur Prize winner. And at the time, she was working on problems of water, bacterial contamination of water in the developing world. And I remember she stood up at the 100K competition, and her pitch went basically like this. She said, 1.9 billion people on the planet don't have access to clean water. That was a little shocking. The only way to test for bacterial contamination is to incubate a sample of the water for 24 hours. The incubators that are currently on the market are all powered by electricity. The 1.9 billion people who don't have access to clean water basically don't have access to electricity. I have an incubator that does not require electricity. Are you interested in hearing more? I can still hear that whole pitch. It was very succinct. Why this? It's a big problem. 1.9 billion people. Why now? She's got a solution. Why this team is a little harder for first. We'll talk about team, it's important. She went on to actually develop the phase change incubator, which I think is still in effect around the world. The executive summary. Again, it's like a resume that then gets you the rest of it read. The elevator pitch is to the executive summary like the executive summary is to the full presentation. Think of the pyramid. The summary is going to tell you who you are, what your vision or strategy is, what are you going to do or propose to do, how big is the market or the impact potential of what it is you're doing, what do you need in order to make it happen. However, don't put any terms in any of your documents. We'll talk about that, at least in the US, when we talk about securities laws on the night we do the legal stuff. And what is your sustainable competitive advantage? That is, if you do this, you know, what makes it possible that other people won't just copy you? And when the reader's finished or reading the thing or listening to your pitch, he or she should be able to turn and tell someone else what you're really up to. And it's not an easy thing to boil everything you're doing down to something that's that clear. Here's an example, a couple of examples of real executive summaries that I'll use for illustration. First one is called Electronic Components. I'll just sort of read it. It's a startup company that will make a variety of electronic components, beginning with a new type of aluminum-based capacitor. The unique product, coupled with excessive demand for capacitor devices, will provide us with an ample share of the capacitor market and numerous opportunities for expansion. The founders are dedicated and determined to make the venture a successful and profitable entity. It's always good to say that to investors. I mean, kind of funny. Technical expertise is provided by James F. Lynch, who has been involved in designing capacitors for 11 years. He got a bachelor degree from MIT. Now, the question is, can you even know what it is they're proposing to do? What is this excessive demand for capacitors? Why is there that? How big is the market? The fact that Lynch had 11 years of experience and was from MIT may get him a meeting. It reads more like a grant proposal when you go further down and look at it. Now contrast that with People's Express, which was the version sort of the Southwest today. And it says, the eastern seaboard of the US is ripe for entry of a new, super efficient, low-cost air carrier to provide quick, reliable intercity air transportation. Such an entity would bring to the Northeast the same benefits that have accrued to other areas of the US. Chief among these are frequent jet commuter service, prices competitive with automobiles, fulfillment of congressional goals and a deregulation act. And the company is going to be able to achieve these through aggressive, innovative management that's been tested in the field, equipment and facilities designed for low-cost production, manpower selected, trained, and motivated by efficient profit motive. You can read this as being non-union, and new systems to be applied to the entire business. Now, I think if you compare those two summaries, it's much clearer what People Express is doing. You get a clearer idea of why now you might find an opportunity. This idea of a congressional goal is a game changer. So I put those two there, and you'll see them in the deck, so you get an idea of the difference. The virtual ink executive summary is in the materials. For those of you taking the course, a couple things to note. First, this is not an example of a good executive summary format. People tend to go and copy this when they hand them in. Just tell your story that answers the 3 whys that I talked about. Why this, why now, why this team. Also note the financial numbers down here. Initially required borrowing $320,000 to complete the prototype and a further investment of $2.2 million to get to market. Look at that when the onward comes in and tells you what it really took to get to market. So now the body of the plan, body of your thinking about it is, what is the opportunity? How big is it? What are the trends? How fast is it growing or will it grow? Why is this the right time for your product or service? And I think about it as the convergence of opportunity and solution. Air traffic control system is an example. We had in the 100K competition once a team that said, our plan is to design and implement a brand new air traffic control system for the US, and it had all sorts of wonderful technical things. It was really quite amazing, but the judges said, well, that's all fine and good, but you got to change the whole system. How's that going to happen? I remember the answer was, well, didn't you know that the FAA has put out a request for proposal to change the air traffic control system? No. If you'd told us that, it would have been something different. So that was an opportunity. There are two lessons there. One, there was an opportunity of a solution and a change that would enable that, but they didn't convey it at all. So, don't assume that people know the things you know. The other thing is 3D printing. 3D printing has been around for the initial patents. It's an example of a great technology, but it wasn't the right time because there weren't enough other components that were needed for a solution that was viable. We see a lot of it now, everything from printing entire cars or houses using 3D printing. Market analysis is another important thing. What are the existing or planned markets? Are there segments? Bob's going to talk about segments. Who's there? And what's the competition? And if you say there is no competition, you sort of missed it, because if there's no competition, then nobody wants what you have, or you haven't been able to convey anybody what it is you're doing. How big is the market? Who are the current players? Pretend you're the Airbnb founders. What would the world look like at that point, and how would you fit in? And an important thing is who loses if you win, and what will be their response? I've heard that, I can't tell you how many times, from venture capitals was looking at plans. Okay, so you're great, but if you win, what are the competitors going to do? Are they going to roll over? What's your response? What's the go-to-market? How are you going to get there? How are you going to price it? How are you going to distribute it? Who's the first customer? Who's the second? How will you reach them? What's the cost of reaching them? And then one famous thing that you always hear from venture capitalists, okay, I get it, but will the dogs eat the dog food? You've got a wonderful formula for dog food, but show me some evidence that the dogs actually want to eat it. And again, Bob's going to talk about customers a little bit later. Development plan, where is it today? And the key here is to make sure you're not going to run out of resources. Nuclear fusion has been a project that's been going on for a long time. It's not there yet. You don't want a nuclear fusion project. I looked at Zipcar in the early days, and I'm pleased that they transformed the whole rental car industry, but it was not clear that good investment. There were so many moving pieces, so much out of the control of the entrepreneur that I just didn't think it was useful. And I don't think the people that actually ran a company made much money in it, much less the investors. The important thing is don't get caught between rounds of financing. This is the action plan. What are you actually going to do? As engineers, a lot of our people that take the course or have engineering training, we look at all the tasks that have to be done in order to deliver something. Investors look at, where are the risks, and where are the risks in doing it? So how do we de-risk this? What are the key activities that if you could nail would accelerate your success? So, if you decide maybe you're going to build a Golden Gate Bridge, it's going to take a lot of things to get it done. But maybe the important thing is to do a drill to see how deep you have to put the pilings in, and maybe you secure an option on an access road. It's a different way of thinking, the way engineering could be thinking about things. You want to reduce or eliminate dependencies so you don't get caught between rounds where you run out of money, you have to go back, and it's not been a success, it can lead to what are called down rounds, where the valuation drops and it's not a good scene. And Ronald will talk about that passionately in his last session. A bunch of appendices you might put in a plan. These are things that you may need to build your case. Have them ready, but don't don't lead with them. Think of them as my pillars on that pyramid. You really should have them fine-tune targeting of the plan. If you're like me, after I've rewritten this a few times, I can't really read them objectively anymore. I say that's the bit about customers. So have a clean read from somebody, and definitely a finance person, if you're putting full financials together, just to make sure you're not doing something really stupid, like projecting 95% gross margins for a hardware product would be a non-starter for just about anything. And if you're going to go raise money, you really should talk to a lawyer. We'll talk about that on the law night. Here's a plan as a financing document. The first reading typically of a plan or a pitch is, does it make a cut? Do you get an opportunity to make a further? The second is to justify the investment. If you're an investor, why would I invest? And the third is there a plan that can be committed to? And if you don't make the first cut, you don't get a chance for the second. So the things that help you make first cut is an idea that's too good to ignore, a promise that's too good to turn down, a team that's good enough to believe in. On that score, most investors say they would rather invest in an A team with a B idea than the other way around, because stuff's going to happen and a really good team is going to figure it out. And an action plan that's credible and focused shows that they thought through what they're doing. Both some passion, but some heavy. I've seen some crazy plans over the years. That's why some plans fail to make the cut. It's an insufficient market. You want $5 million to build a product for a market that's only 20 million. That's not going to get any type of professional investments. In financing sourcing night, we're going to talk about different types of financing. Venture investors are going to want to see typically 10 times potential on their money. But the important thing is venture capital is not the only way to go. There are a whole bunch of other ways to get resources that you need. The investment is maybe too large for the promise. The failure to understand the market goes beyond the concept of just market. A number of years ago in the 100K, there was a technology for the nasal delivery of vaccines instead of a needle. It would be a powder that would turn into an aerosol, spray it into the nose. It was designed for the developing world, and it failed. And the theory was, well, this stuff didn't need to be refrigerated. Needles cause a whole bunch of issues. They're painful. Why don't we just do a nasal spray? And what they failed to understand was that and educate was the mothers in the countries where they tried to take this to market rejected it because they didn't think it was effective. They associated a needle prick and the baby crying with something that was important because it was going to be good for the baby. Now that's failure to understand the culture of the environment is like failure to understand the market. Why? And if they'd educated on that, they might have had a better outcome. Plans fail to make the first cut because they're just a mess, basically. Regulatory barriers insufficiently addressed. I remember one time that I was looking at something that clearly required FDA approval, and there was no mention of FDA at all. And when I asked about it, there was sort of blank stares. So, that was sort of a wasted time. Other kinds of things are cosmetic. You get one chance to make a first impression. And sometimes I can't understand what you're talking about. A lot of jargony, and underneath there's no discussion of what is the opportunity. It can be sloppy, printing, grammar, it can be naive projections. Just all these things are reasons you may not get a chance. So what we've sort of covered here, run through this stuff is why develop a plan, what should be in it, and talking a little bit about the plan as a financing document. This is like the fire hose dumping a lot on you, but we're going to dissect this night by night. We're going to talk business models. How do you figure out how to make something sustainable. We're going to be talking, financing strategies. We're going to be talking the legal. Bob's going to talk about customers. We'll get into a lot of that detail, but just think of this as just the first run through at the top. Try to remember the pyramid. I think it's useful to think about what you need to do. You try to distill everything down to the simplest possible explanation of why this, why now, and why this team. But make sure you have all of this stuff ready if questioned. So we're going to do a break now, unless we have some questions from the TAs. Let me just talk about it. We'll do a 5-minute break so they can set up the breakout rooms. And then I think we're going to do in 20 minutes. Is that right? Claire?
Yes.
Good. Well, that was an interesting experiment. I think we'll figure out how to make it work a little bit more smoothly. Also, I dipped around into a few of the breakout rooms and I saw different approaches. So if you have any recommendations, please pass them along to us. We'll try to see how we can make this work even better. We will probably run breakout rooms for several sessions, depending on how useful they are for people. So with that, I'd just like to, for people taking the course for credit, just wanted to go over what's required. It is the course website for the general public is nutsandbolts.mit.edu. For those who are registered through the MIT registrar or through cross-registration, there's a link to the Canvas page at the bottom of the main nutsandbolts.mit.edu. That gets you some of the materials that have some copyright issues on them. It's 3 credits pass-fail. There are really only 2 requirements. In the actual physical world, we would require you to be present in class and to signal, because a lot of what the readings are fine, but a lot of the learning comes from listening to the people. We'll figure out how to do the forum bit on that. There's a written requirement of an executive summary or a pitch deck of an idea you're thinking about. We do encourage teams. That's why we try to do these special interests and breakout. We'd like to email from you by the 20th, sort of midway through the 3 weeks here, with the team and the idea. If you could send that to the TAs. The TA email is nutsandbolts-ta@mit.edu. That way we'll understand how teams are formed. If you're having trouble forming a team or finding a team, you can also contact the TAs. That's sort of the basic requirements. For those who are not taking it for credit and do not have access to the Canvas site, most of the readings, there are links to them on the main page, the public page, the nutsandbolts.mit.edu. For some of them that are excerpts from books, those books can either be purchased or you may find some places on the web where you can get copies of them, of the sections. But for copyright reasons, we're not allowed to just put them out there generally. So with that, that's the overview. I'm sure there'll be questions and we can talk about that as time goes on.